In order to experience any of the benefits of a spiritual path, you have to do more than just read about it. You have to practice it. But many newcomers to Thelema are unsure of where to begin or what spiritual practices are the most important. So in this video, I'm going to cover 6 spiritual practices Aleister Crowley thought were important for all Thelemic magicians to practice. This will give you the confidence to begin your own spiritual journey and to start experiencing the changes that you've only read about up until this point in books. If you find this video interesting, please like it and subscribe to the channel. This will help boost the video in the algorithm and ensure that you are notified of any future videos I make. Please also consider supporting me on Patreon. I will leave a link to my Patreon in the description for this video. Let's get started. The curriculum that I'm going to present to you is a mashup of 2 documents. One of them is called De Cultu, which is from a book called Liber Aleph, and the other comes from the Constitution of the Order of Thelemites. Liber Aleph, or 111, the Book of Wisdom and Folly, is a book of 208 short letters of sorts that Aleister Crowley wrote to his pupil Charles Stansfeld Jones in 1918. It's an important work in which Crowley commented on many aspects of Thelema and magic. Today I will be drawing upon section 16 of that book, which is called De Cultu, or On Worship. These practices are not religious observances in the traditional sense. Some of them are what might be termed mindfulness exercises, while others are core practices of Thelemic magic. The other text I'm going to draw upon, the Constitution of the Order of Thelemites, was something that Crowley wrote in the 1920s for a planned organization which actually never got off the ground. But in it, he mentions spiritual practices that he thought all beginners should do. There is some overlap with De Cultu, and it brings in some other practices that are not included there. I'm going to piece these practices together into a structure, which I'm going to describe for you as I go along. The first practice you should do is called saying will. This is a short Thelemic mindfulness practice that is done before taking meals. When I use the term mindfulness practice, what I mean is that it is something that reminds you of what you ought to be doing. Nowadays, because of the influence of Western Buddhism, when people hear mindfulness, they think of present-centered awareness, which is non-judgmental. When I use the term mindfulness practice, I mean present-centered awareness, which is mindful of what you ought to be doing. So it has an element of judgment to it. The purpose of saying will is to remind oneself of the accomplishment of the great work, which is the knowledge and conversation of one's holy guardian angel and doing one's true will. As you'll see, all of the practices that I'm going to talk about today are connected with this process. There are several variations on will. The simplest one is one that you do by yourself. Before taking your meal, you knock 3 times, then 5 times, then 3 times. Then you say, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. It is my will to eat and to drink, that I may fortify my body thereby, that I may accomplish the great work. Love is the law, love under will." You can find other variations online, including one that you can do with groups of people, but this one's the simplest. The second practice is the fourfold adoration of the sun. This is contained in a text called Liber Resh vel Helios sub figura 200. This is Latin for book Resh, or Helios, under the figure 200. Resh is the 20th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It means head in English, and its numerical value is 200. Helios is, of course, the Greek god of the sun. Liber Resh is a practice that is done 4 times a day. It's done once at dawn, once at solar noon, once at sunset, and once at nadir, or solar midnight. The practice is done in 3 parts. First, one faces the direction of the sun. They give what's called a grade sign. They give an invocation or a prayer, and then they give the sign of silence. Both the grade sign and the invocation are described in the text. If you go to my site, Mouth of the Beast, I have the text there, and there are actually links that show you pictures of how to do the grade signs. I'll put a link to Mouth of the Beast below. The sign of silence is described in Liber O, and it's also on my site. You basically just put your finger to your lip like that. This is then followed by the adoration. There are several variations on what the adoration is supposed to be. Most people usually recite the part of the Book of the Law that starts "Unity uttermost showed." Then one engages in what is referred to in the text as holy meditation. There are different ways to do Liber Resh. There are different interpretations of what the grade signs are supposed to be. There are different interpretations of what the adoration is supposed to be. There's different interpretations of what the holy meditation is supposed to be. If you're just beginning for a holy meditation, you can just observe silence for 30 seconds. Just like that, in the sign of silence. That's a perfectly legitimate way to start. The rationale that Crowley gives for this practice in De Cultu is that it establishes one's place in nature and her harmonies. And he says elsewhere that advanced practitioners can use this practice to draw upon the magical powers of the sun. If you'd like me to elaborate on Liber Resh and how to do it, let me know in the comments below. I can do a video on that. But I'm assuming that a lot of people already know how to do this. The third practice you should take up is the assumption of the god form of Hurpakrat. So as I mentioned a moment ago, when you give the invocation in Liber Resh, you give the sign of silence. So the sign of silence is the sign of Hurpakrat. The assumption of a god form is a little more complicated than just simply giving a gesture. You also have to envision the form of the god, and you have to imagine it enveloping your entire body and coinciding with it. This is a way of connecting with the force of that god on the astral plane, and it can even be thought as a rudimentary form of astral projection. The purpose of the practice of assuming the god form of Hurpakrat is to concentrate the power of the aura around the soul. I mentioned a moment ago that when you are practicing Liber Resh, you are adoring God in the image of the sun. But the image of the sun corresponds to the inner God, which is the sun of the soul, and which Crowley also refers to as mystery of mystery and the center and secret of the sun. During the adoration portion of Liber Resh, if you're saying the passage from the Book of the Law, you say, I have made a secret door into the house of Ra and tomb of Kefra and of Ahathor. The way I understand it, the god form of Hurpakrat opens up that secret door into the center and secret of the sun. So the idea here is that you're moving from adoration of God in the outer universe in Resh, and then through the God form of Hurpakrat, you're opening the gateway to access God in the inner universe. The fourth practice that you should add is the ritual of the pentagram. Now you have two options here. You can either perform the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, or you can perform the star ruby. The lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram was taught at the neophyte grade in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Crowley attached a lot of importance to this ritual, which he practiced throughout his life. He said it could be used to strengthen the aura. He said it's not merely a banishing ritual, it is also the medicine of metals and the stone of the wise. In other words, it accomplishes the great work. The ritual of the pentagram can also mean the star ruby or Liber 25. Crowley described the star ruby as a new and more elaborate version of the lesser ritual of the pentagram. It was first published in the Book of Lies, and Crowley published a slightly altered version of it in Magick and Theory and Practice. You can do whichever one of these that you want, but my recommendation is that you do the Star Ruby. The purpose of the Star Ruby is to create a bridge between the microcosm and the macrocosm. In the context of Thelema, this means creating a link between your ordinary consciousness and the secret God which is concealed at the center of your own soul. This center is called the star or the holy guardian angel. And in the ritual of the star ruby, the way to this God is symbolized using the symbols of Nuit, Hadit, Therion, Babylon, and the god Pan. So the ritual itself really encapsulates the entire intention of Thelemic magic, and it's expressing it using a symbol set which is intrinsic to Thelema itself. For this reason, I think that makes the Star Ruby more potent and more relevant to the Thelemic spiritual path. Also, by relating to your own divinity through the symbols of Nuit, Hadit, Therion, and Babylon, you are imbuing these symbols with mystical and magical energy. You're making them sacred. You are imprinting the magical power of your own soul onto them. Technically, you could do that with any symbol set, but the advantage of using the Thelemic symbol set here is that it is a way of dedicating and rededicating yourself to this particular spiritual path. Before I go into the fifth practice, if you're enjoying this video, there's a really good chance you'll also enjoy my free PDF, Unlock the Mysteries of Thelema. In this guide to the spirituality of Aleister Crowley, I answer the top 10 most frequently asked questions about Thelema. This document is great for beginners, but it's also good for filling in gaps in your knowledge. Best of all, it's completely free. If you're interested in that, there is a link down in the description of this video to download that PDF. The fifth practice that you're going to incorporate is the Star Sapphire. Also known as Liber 36, the Star Sapphire is a Thelemic version of the lesser ritual of the hexagram. It's also included in the Book of Lies, which is where Crowley first printed the Star Ruby. It's been supposed that the Star Sapphire is a thinly veiled version of a sex magic ritual. This might be the case, I don't really know for sure. Every time I've seen an interpretation of this as a sex magic ritual, it's come across as improbable, to say the least. It seems far more likely to me that the Star Sapphire includes a reference to the 9th degree secret of OTO, which is a secret of sexual magic. However, if the Star Sapphire is an expression of that secret, it wouldn't really be much of a secret anymore, now would it? So that makes me a little bit dubious of the idea that this is just somehow, an encoded sex magic ritual. My suggestion to you is that instead of treating it as a sex magic ritual, just treat it as a temple ritual, the same as the Star Ruby. For the magical rood, use a wand. For the mystic rose, use a flower. For the rosy cross, draw the sign of the beast. For the sacrament, maybe have a cake of light or a cup of wine. Just use your imagination to fill in the gaps. The way I interpret this ritual, the purpose of it is to incarnate Set, which is a symbol of the secret self or the joy of existence. In other words, the macrocosmic reality that you made contact with in the Star Ruby is now uncoiled from within the self, and it pours into the mind and the soul, where it conceives a child, thereby fulfilling the miracle of incarnation. So in a manner of speaking, it is a sex magic ritual, but it is a sex magic ritual you are doing between your soul and the God that lies hidden within you. Go through the text, use your imagination to figure out how to work out all the details of it, but as you do it, just remain mindful of what the purpose of it is, which is to incarnate this magical child within yourself. The sixth and final practice to add is Liber 44, the Mass of the Phoenix. This is a Eucharistic ritual. It is also printed in the Book of Lies. 44 is the enumeration of the Hebrew word for blood. In the course of this ritual, you make the mark of the beast on your breast with a burin, which is a steel engraving tool. Guys, do not carve 666 into your fucking chest. This is not the 1980s. You are not Richard Ramirez, okay? Take the point of the tool, scratch the symbol into your chest so that it draws a little bit of blood, and you then soak this little bit of blood into the cake of light to perform the ritual. If this is still too intense for you, make your own Eucharistic ritual. I did a video a while back on how to do this, but I believe that if you use a little bit of common sense, you can do this ritual without giving yourself an infection or, sending yourself to the hospital. This ritual completes the trajectory of the preceding rituals. So in Resh, you made contact with God as an outer image or an outer form in the form of the sun. In the God form of Horparkrat, you opened up the gateway to the God within you, the Son of the Soul. With the Star Ruby, you created a bridge between your ordinary consciousness and that star at the center of you, using the symbols of Nuit, Hadit, Therion, Babylon, and Pan. In the Star Sapphire, you incarnated the fire or the force of that god into your soul, thereby becoming pregnant with it. And then finally, in the Mass of the Phoenix, you are using the magical power of that child to transmute external reality into a god and to unite with it. This accomplishes, at least in part, the great work, which is what you swore to accomplish in the first practice, which was saying will. Now, I know this was quick. There are practices in Dekultu that I completely omitted because they're not really beginner practices. If you want to hear more about those, or if you want to hear more about any of the practices mentioned in this video, just leave a comment below and maybe I can do a follow-up video on that. If you found this video interesting, there's a really good chance you're going to like this other video as well, so be sure to click on it. Until next time, love is the law, love Underwill.